Welcome to the Dividend Talk podcast, episode number 13, Why Savings Rates Matter. Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Dividend Talk. I'm your co-host, Engineer My Freedom, and today I'm joined with European eDGI. This is a podcast where we discuss our passion for dividend growth investing with our own unique European flavour. If you're new to this channel, please hit the like button and subscribe to us, and check out our previous episodes on YouTube and Spotify and all your other favourite platforms. See you on the inside. Hey eDGI, another busy week. How have you been?
I've been pretty good. It was, of course, again, busy at work. I think we can re-record this sentence every time lately. But no, the week was pretty good, and I'm actually looking much forward for the weekend. I guess it's one of those days now that you feel that summer is transitioning into autumn. So I still hope to get some time outside before it really becomes too chilly.
Yeah, usually when the kids go back to school over here, we get a week or two of really good weather. So I'm waiting for that to happen, and that will officially end summer over here in Ireland.
How are things on your end?
All good, all good. Same as last week. Busy in work. I've not had a whole lot of time to look after my blog that I want, but I did get a post or two out. But it's all good. We can't complain. We have a job, isn't it? So we happy to be working away.
So was there anything in the news that caught your attention?
Of course, the football's back this week, so that's the main highlight. But no, I suppose that there was a small thing that kind of stuck out this week, and it's Apple kind of up to their own tricks. They're taking on the world, it seems. They had a recent fallout with Epic Games, and now they've changed their terms and services in their app, so it's making it harder for Microsoft users or Google users to buy in app and stuff. So just kind of Google locking down their ecosystem again and making it really hard for other people to kind of break into them. How about you?
Yeah, well, I think Apple has a great monopoly there, almost you could say, but that's also the result of a good business, good hardware, and usually you would say that hardware and such is no mode, right, in other companies because it's easily replaced. But Apple really built such a lifestyle around it that they're in this luxury position that they can actually dictate the rules a bit. So it will be interesting to see how this goes on in court.
Yeah, I mean Apple are great, aren't they? They took away headphone jack out of their phones, for example, and then they created a product, AirPods, that fixed a problem they created, and they made millions out of it. So look, they have a great business model, and as you said, they have a huge following. I don't really like the phones, but I do have an iPad, which I love. So there's always everyone has some bit of Apple, I suppose, around them. So yeah. They're a good business to follow if you're ever thinking of setting one up. Anything stand out for you in the news?
Yeah, definitely. I think the vaccine trials around Astrazeneca. So what happened there with Astrazeneca is that they just had, how you say it? They had some with an adverse event. So therefore the vaccine trial was paused because a woman in the UK, so close to you, she experienced some symptoms of a rare neurological disorder called transverse myelitis, if I understood it well. For me, this is really interesting because I remember politicians especially saying that by October we would have a vaccine, or by September. So we should get prepared as citizens to stand in a queue to get our vaccine shots. That's how it came across when they were selling it using their words. I just think like literally that we're in this, you can almost say, in this shithole until next summer, because first of all, we don't know yet the efficacy of the vaccines we will get. It will be 100% or 70%. If you hear some of the specialists, they say 70%. Secondly, to that, these human trials are really important actually, because we might need to dose 9 billion people on this planet. So think about it. You don't want to screw up there with having 1 on 1,000 having side effects and such, right? So this is not a human game. Yeah. So you don't want to you don't want the vaccines to have a higher fatality rate than the virus itself, as an example. And by the way, those 9 billion, or depending if you need more shots, it can be even more, right? They still need to be produced. Yeah. So we're in the shithole still for at least 9 months or longer. I'm not too optimistic. So hence why I find this news so interesting.
Yeah, I mean, hats off to these people that step up and do these trials. I don't know if it's brave or not, but I mean, we don't know what's going into these vaccines at the minute. So what they're putting into their body is unknown, and they're kind of taking the hit for us, taking these trials, and fair play to them. But I just can't see how a vaccine can be rushed through that quickly. Like, vaccines take years. We don't fully understand COVID-19. We don't know if you can contract it twice, 3 times. If you get it once, are you immune? We just don't know.
We don't know enough.
Yeah, it's not been around long enough to make a call. So I'm like you. I'm kind of expecting, we're starting to see rising here in Ireland, expecting it to rise throughout the winter, and hopefully by the summer it'll go away again for a bit.
So I have actually quite a lot of confidence in the scientists, because this is why what we call biotechnology. They can engineer these vaccines at the moment, and most of them, I would say, not were literally on the shelf, but they just refactored a little bit existing vaccines that they were working on, as an example, for the H1N1 or something like that. So I have a lot of faith in the engineering itself by the scientists in the company, but it's really about the adverse events, the side effects that people can get, which we don't know enough. And to your point as well, what with the antibodies? Are they there to stay, or can we get again? Yeah. But that was my news. So what it means for me as an investor is that we'll probably see some longer volatility in this space going forward.
But it might be a good time to look at companies like Pfizer, for example, that are in this space, that are trying to produce the vaccine. Whoever cracks it first will be at the forefront. So it's worth keeping an eye out on those kind of companies.
True.
But we'll move on to more lighter matters. As I kind of mentioned to you off camera, but I kind of stayed away from the news this week because I just didn't want to read about COVID or Brexit this week. So to move on to a little bit of a lighter matter, so we'll talk about our main topic, which is, why do saving rates matter? And I suppose I'll ask you the first question, and that is, why does saving rates matter for you?
So as a dividend growth investor, right, I'm focused on my, let's say, the moment where my income from dividends cover my monthly expenses. And why savings rate matter in this? If I can live, let's say, on 50% of my current income, that means I can invest 50% of my income as well. And if you do the math, and there are some calculators for that, but if you do the math, if I would, for instance, be able to invest now every month 50% of my income at a, let's say, dividend growth rate of 6%, capital appreciation of 6% and such, and let's take tax out of the equation, then it would take on average 15 years to, how is it, to cover your expenses with the money that you invested to build up your portfolio. So which means 15 years is kind of my determination that I need to be really disciplined in every month stashing money into the stock market. If I make it, for instance, only 30%, it might take 20 years. If I take only 10 years, 10% might take 30, 35 years, because the compounding is really important as well here. So hence, this is why the savings rate for me really matters. And I'm currently on average around the savings rate of 50 to 55%, 45 to 50%. So I'm almost on half of it.
Yeah.
It depends a little bit on the seasonality in my expenses, but also in my income.
And are you quite frugal with your money? Do you noticeably cut back and change your lifestyle to adapt, or do you?
No, I just haven't really changed my lifestyle for the last 15 years since I'm a student. So it's not like that I still live as a student. I don't live in a student dorm anymore. I live in a house. I've got kids. But I'm still having the same approach to money. I'm still having the same approach to spending stuff. So my mindset has not really changed. Hence, why this dividend growth investing actually suits me well. I'm in general. I've always been frugal. Yeah.
And is your wife? Is she on board? And I know like it can be a struggle sometimes too if you have two people that have different mindsets when it comes to money. How do you balance that?
So, I mean, my wife isn't investing or something like that. She leaves that all up to me. So, from that point of view, you could argue maybe she's on board, but maybe not too involved. When it comes to her spending habits, they're similar to mine. I mean, she wants to be a lady, right? So yes, she has the expensive stuff related to that, but she I would still say she's modest from that point of view, and I think it fits as well. And what is probably important to say, right? I'm not like turning every coin around to find a saving. We just take it as we go. I'm not budgeting really tight in the sense of that I'm really trying to reduce everywhere 1%, 2%. No. So we also take it a bit as a go. But what I've learned over the last years, if I focus at work, my salary increase offsets, let's say, the potential savings that I could gain. So if I get a 3% salary increase, it does much more than a 3% saving reduction.
Okay.
So, and it is for me a peace in mind to not every time need to dig in Excel sheets. So how do I know my savings rate? I just pay myself first. So I put half of my salary straight away to my investment account and I live off the rest. And sometimes it happens that I need to go to my savings account to pull a little bit because I had some higher expenditures. And then I try to, in a month where I have low expenses, I try to cover that up again. That's why I know I'm around 50% at the moment, because I can live off this money.
Yeah. 50% is impressive. I mean, that makes you 15 years to financial independence. But is there still some ideas, and have you still ideas to improve that even more to like 60 or 70%? Have you aspirations to even get to that high? Or
Well, the good thing is I still need, let's say, what shall we say, 7 or 8 years, something like that. So I still have hopefully some salary increases ahead of me. So let's say that I would grow every year with 3%. Maybe my salary will be 30% higher in let's say 5-6 years. Yeah, so you can add that also on top of it. So my savings rate might go then to 65% or something like that if I'm able to keep my costs relatively flat. Yeah, so not too much inflation in my costs. At the same time, I would love to sell our second car. At the moment, it's a bit too difficult for us with kids and school and such. But I do know that if we would ever have trouble, the first thing I would sell is a second car. So it's not so much a really strong need, but rather a want at the
yeah,
moment. But that's where I still have areas to save, and maybe also refinancing my mortgage might still give me something as well. But again, I'm then in the 5%, 10% bracket. Probably the car would be the biggest
yeah.
saving.
It's something that I've done recently. Actually, a couple of 2 months ago, is I've sold my car. So we use my wife's car for now because my workplace is a 5-minute walk less to my workplace. The kids go to school. I can actually see the kids' school from my house, again within walking distance. All the shops are close by. My parents, everything is no more than a 10-minute walk. So it's never really an issue. I suppose the only time we struggle is on a Saturday morning when we have two kids playing two different sports in two different places. But we've got enough people to help us. But I've seen a massive saving from that, and what we've started to do is to pay that off our mortgage early. I always struggle with should I pay a mortgage, should I not pay the mortgage down? And look, there's pros and cons, and it's probably another subject in itself, but that's what we've allocated that money to now. So the money in my car for diesel and petrol and tax, insurance, that's all going to pay off the mortgage. But in terms of saving rate for me, I'm at roughly, I think the last time I checked was about 30%. I think it's a little bit more at the moment. And that's fine. That's fine for me. I am aiming for 50% long term, because like that, I kind of view 50% that if I can save 50%, I work 1 year and I get 1 year free.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the way I'm kind of looking at it. So that's what I'm aiming to get. I asked you the question obviously about your partner and wife, and because I feel that my wife is on board with everything, and she's great and she's supportive, but we just have different spending habits. And if we did, we don't budget too well, but if we did set a budget and say we had, I don't know, X amount for food and X amount for this, something will come up and she'll buy Christmas presents in June or something, and it'll blow the budget out of the water. So we just can't budget, but we do track. I do keep a track. I use an app called Pocketsmith. So I do track what it is, and we just check it every month just to see what we're saving and investing, and it's quite useful. But in terms of budgeting, I just can't do it.
And those 30%, is that family income or is that your individual income?
So my wife is not working at the moment.
Okay.
So obviously we had the coffee shop, which is in the middle of closing down, and she was working there. She is a carer for her sister, so that's more important than her working. But my income is more than enough to support the family and to support her, so she doesn't need to work. She looks after the kids, and she does a great job with everything else. So it's my income, but it's sufficient. I'm on a very good wage, so sufficient to live, pay mortgage, and save 30%.
Yeah.
We could save a little bit more, and when we had the cafe, it was probably up nearly 50-60%. So we have got buffer there, but at the moment it's 30%, which is fine. And with the reduced cost of having no second car, again, we're seeing a lot of benefit from that.
Yeah. And besides, I would say besides selling your car, I guess you started at a certain moment also your journey. So what was your baseline? Were you like living from paycheck to paycheck when you started dividend growth investing, or?
So what happened with me really was, I remember when I started working, and I think I've said this before, I was earning nearly a lot more than what I was earning now in a factory in Waterford, living the high life, but spending everything. It was never kept anything for a rainy day, never ever kept anything. And I remember then the last recession happened and everyone got let go, and I had a Land Rover Jeep that was worth about 60,000 that I could not afford to pay. I have a house that's worth X amount that I couldn't afford to pay, and all these things built up on me. And I remember sitting on my brother's bed asking him for a loan of money to buy Christmas presents for my family, and that was a low that kind of that stuck with me. But that was my turning point into saying that I'll never let that happen again. So I started, even from then, I started putting away a small, even if I was only getting a small amount, I was putting away 20, 30, 40%. And that was the start of the journey. Then I was working a low income job just to get back, because the economy crashed and there was no electrician work anywhere. So I went back working in a call center. Again, it was low income, but I saved as much as I could. I went back to college to do engineering, to progress to electrical, and now I'm on a higher rate. So it's a lot easier. I actually find those lessons were good for me, because I can now live way below my means. Way below. And some of my friends and stuff will always say, how can you afford to go? And like, we went to Australia like for a month and stuff, and how can you afford to do this on one wage? But it's because we're able to budget and put stuff away. Well, not so much budget, but we're able to put stuff away, and it's those experiences that I had that allowed me to have money aside, and I'll never get caught again like that. So that was my trigger point. From a dividend growth investing point of view, for me, and it's the goal, I suppose, for everyone, it's just to cover those expenses, isn't it? So the lower those expenses are, the easier it is to cover. So that's kind of what we're trying to. It's probably why I'm trying to track it, I suppose, is to get a baseline of our lowest possible expenses without having to change my lifestyle, because I have a pretty good lifestyle. So I don't want to be frugal. I don't want to change anything. We travel post COVID anyway. We travel quite a bit, maybe 3-4 times a year. That's not going to change when this ends. So we want to keep that lifestyle. So then I need to either increase my income or increase the amount I save to bring in dividends to generate that income for me.
Yeah, I think we're also in this age that you typically see income growth, right? You usually start just after university with your starting income, and then you don't feel the compounding effect yet. But it's really in salary, it's also compounding. If you every year get 3 or 4%, a 4%, let's say 10 years later, is much more impactful than the first ones. And I think this is probably also because I want to ask you, like, what's your starting? What would be your advice to a starter now? Because we saw a lot of new people coming into the community since COVID-19. So my advice would really be to don't focus only on the how is it, on the expense aspect, because my advice would be like live, enjoy, don't start eating noodles. Although Jason Fieber is a good example who managed it, I think, in 6 years. If you can do it in 6 years, do it. But I wouldn't like to look back at my life later and think like I missed out on 6 years of my life. Yeah, and that's also important for me. But hey, everyone their own style there. If it fits you, just do it. But my advice would also be to focus on your income part, maybe sometimes even more than on the expense part, to avoid falling in the trap of penny wise, pound foolish.
Yeah, and I would have to agree. I mean, again, I agree with the fact that I think you should live. You should live when you're young. You should enjoy life. That's what life is for. Yes, you get the compounding effect, and yes, you should save as much as you can, but you don't want to save 50% and struggle. You want to live. You want to experience life. You want to travel, meet new people, meet new experiences, and yes, focus on that income side. And for me, I suppose that means taking a risk when you're young, but that risk could be setting up a business, any kind of business, you know. And they're the type of risks that you can take, and you don't need massive amount of money to do that. And I know this because we set up a coffee shop, and I know you don't need massive experience. You just need to actually just believe in yourself and say, look, you can do it. So I would say the same thing. Live your life, enjoy yourself, put a small bit away for a rainy day, yes, but enjoy yourself and worry about let the compounding take effect of the small amount you're saving, and worry about that later. But just enjoy yourself in your late teens and early 20s.
Cool. I think these are some great words of wisdom from you, and a nice, really nice moment to end our main topic for today. And because I would like to go to the listeners' questions, because we have quite a bunch today. So let's go to some of those and spend some time answering those questions.
Yeah, we've got some great questions, and there was lots of questions come in today. I was actually thinking of just doing the whole podcast on some of these questions. Some of them are pretty good, but I'll ask you the first one because it came in from our friend over in IO Charts. And he said, how long into the future do you look when trying to determine the valuation of a growth stock?
Yeah. So actually, I can answer that question because I wrote a blog post about Microsoft the other day, and I'm typically using a 5-year forecast for every mature company, or less, right? But in general, I would say 5 years, because that's something where you can easily envision let's say, the time scale with, and what their portfolio could do over the next 5 years. And it also fits well in a discounted cash flow model. I work sometimes with 2 years, let's say, and 2 years is really for the slow companies like AT&T. For instance, if AT&T would people would say now would grow 5, 6, 7% per year, I would probably use that for 2 years and then quickly go to their terminal growth rate of 2% or something like that. because that matters in a discounted cash flow valuation. And the 10 years, I would use that for hyper growth companies, but I think I'm still in a learning mode there. And last week's episode was really good for that. To have investment talk there, because you really gave me also a different perspective. And actually, what I learned from him is that discounted cash flow is probably just not the best for hyper growth stocks. So I would say 5 years is a pretty good one, because it allows you to understand and have a little bit of vision of the business there. And at the same time, it allows you to calculate quite nicely fair value calculations.
Very good. I still have to spend some time actually studying these discounted cash flows. It's on my list, but I just haven't got around to it yet. And when I do, I know who to come to.
Cool.
So we had another question from Investment Talk, who was on last week's show, and he said, if you had to liquidate your entire portfolio and put the proceeds into only 3 securities that you could not look at or touch for 5 years, who would you choose and why?
So I'll be boring first. First one would be Johnson & Johnson, because I think Johnson & Johnson is not heavily overvalued at the moment. But it's a healthcare stock. So if it would be a healthcare stock, I would choose Johnson & Johnson at the moment. I think it will, in 5 years, it will just muddle along and still give us a 6-7% growth. And this falls in the category protect your principal first. But I would also take only one stock from one sector there, because, for instance, if America decides to kill drug prices, then you don't want to lose half of your money there in the upcoming 5 years. So my second one would be Unilever. This probably also doesn't come as a surprise. And the third one will be a technology sector, Microsoft. So it gives me a bit of slow growth, high growth, and 3 different sectors, of which I feel that all 3 sectors are kind of anti-cyclical. So if really would happen with COVID-19, Unilever would do good, Johnson & Johnson would still do good, and Microsoft would also still do good. So those would be my 3. And yours?
Johnson & Johnson nearly made my list. I had a list of 5 companies and it was there, but it did not make the final 3. So the first one I have is Microsoft. So what I was looking for really was a really strong balance sheet, low free cash flow, so sub 30, in around 30% or under, and typically then a high dividend growth rate. So there were the 3 metrics that I used for this. So Microsoft obviously have a 33% free cash flow. They have a dividend growth over 10 years of over 10%, and they had like 118 billion equity. So very strong. So they were my first pick. Apple then were my second pick. I didn't do the sector diversification like you, just went all in on tech. Why not? So again, Apple 20% free cash flow, over 10% dividend growth, and 90 billion equity. And then the last one was a toss-up, and one of them is controversial because there's a lot of talk on Twitter, and we have questions about it later, which was Walgreens. But they didn't actually make my list. But interesting with them, based on just on those metrics alone, they have like a 38% cash flow, a high dividend growth rate over 10%, and 24 billion in equity. But they weren't my third pick. My third pick was actually Visa. I mean, look, they've got really strong cash flow, and I think they'll be there. So those 3 companies, Visa, Microsoft, Apple, I would be happy in just buying those and closing my eyes and waking up in 5 years, and I'd be fairly confident that they'll be still there.
Yeah. Good news. If all goes well, Microsoft will announce a dividend hike next week, because it's usually around the 15th of September. So I'm expecting on at least a double-digit dividend hike, at least 10%. So let's see. If they don't do it, then I'm not understanding, when they have so much high growth and so much cash, why they are not growing. That would be for me also a bit of a signal, like, what? Don't you believe in your own growth?
Yeah.
So let's see.
We'll see. Time will tell.
Yeah. Okay, next question. And by the way, thanks, Investment Talk. Was an interesting thought exercise. Then we had, and this is perfect question for you, EMF. Dividend Wave and Bo Phil, they are asking about what's your take on Walgreens and their declining share price. Is this a golden opportunity or is the value trap?
I mean, it's for me. I think it's an opportunity, but you can see both sides of the fence really, and you got to kind of weigh up the risks and the rewards. So let's look at the risks first. I mean, Walgreens have stuck to their guns. They haven't really diversified from the retail pharmacy. I know, like their competitor CVS, for example, have diversified and spent huge money on vertically integrating their business and going out to different branches. But Walgreens have stuck to their guns and they're really sticking to this retail pharmacy. It's a really, really tough business. Like, I mean, they're under huge pressure from governments, from insurances, and from all sorts of groups to cut costs. I mean, governments don't want high medical costs. Nobody does. They want to, so they're under severe pressure to keep the costs low. They've had huge pressure from online. You've got Walmart and Amazon, which are two absolute animals online with huge presence, and they're trying to catch up to that. I suppose on the flip side of that, you have got the advantage they have online is that you have to be, I think, is it a licensed? There's some sort of license you have to have in the States to be able to sell this stuff online. So Amazon and Walmart won't have that license, whereas Walgreens will. So that kind of plays to them, but they're still competing against two monsters in that game. And also the management is stepping down. Is it Pierre? The name is gone for me, but I think in July they said he's stepping down. So who comes in and what direction he goes, there's a lot of uncertainties. So I can see, yes, looking at it, you can see that it could be a trap. But then I look at the positives. I mean, you've got an aging population over in the States or in the world. These baby boomers are coming of age, so to speak. They're going to need increased healthcare costs. They're expecting healthcare to rise on average 7 to 8% per year. They've got a shop on nearly every corner of America. I mean, I think I mentioned before, but it was in 5 or 7 miles of each house there was a Walgreens store. They've made so I think some good acquisitions. So that, I mean, Walgreens and Alliance Boots merged, so they branched into Europe. I think that's positive. I know we're not seeing the effects of that yet, but I believe we will. The acquisition of Rite Aid as well, which I think is very good. But they also are starting to branch out a little bit and make their own like health and wellness brands. So that's doing quite strong for them. So they're coming away from the drugs a little bit and a little bit less reliant on them. But for me, I mean, I mentioned earlier that the free cash flow and the high dividend growth rate. I think the dividend is safe, and as a dividend investor, that's what I really want. Like, the dividend is safe. I do think like they are in a downtrend since 2015, but I do think there will be light at the end of that tunnel. That they will turn this around. I'm bullish on them. I know they have a deal done with. It's gone for me now. I think it's at Village MD. I should have wrote this down, but they want to open up, I think, 500 doctor offices, 500 to 700 doctor offices throughout the whole of the States, which will be, I think, the first company to do that. So I'm quite positive on them. What do you think? Did you get to look at them or?
Well, I looked a little bit at them this afternoon, but I can't give really any intelligent remark regarding the company itself. What I can tell you is that it's about also a little bit about contrarian investing, right? So if you think it's a value play, then usually you're, walking against or swimming against the currency.
Yeah.
So you need to follow your gut feel. There's my experience, and hey, it doesn't need to be your largest position in the portfolio. Yeah, you can make it a 2 or 3% position, and maybe it doubles over time. Hey, it becomes a 5-6% position. So the thesis was right. If you don't believe the company will get bankrupt and such, and the dividends there, then I would actually go it, because if you do multiple bets on such value plays, yeah, only few need to really work out, and they will really create a lot of wealth over the
Yeah.
upcoming years. So if your gut feel says this is it, I would say just take a small position and see it play out, yeah, and not go all in at the same time. That would be my recommendation.
Yeah, 100% agree. Like, I do see the value, and I do see that as a value play. I think they are close to their valuation that they were in 1999, which is crazy. But also agree with you in that no, they're not going to be my largest position. They're not like a tier 1 company, for example. They would be tier 4, tier 3, in where you put a small percentage of portfolio. So I do see it as value. So I have them, and I'm going to keep adding to them at this price. If they drop down to 32, I'll still add them. If they go down to the 20s, then I might go, maybe I was wrong. But at the moment, I'm quite happy to keep adding to them.
Okay, super. So, Dividend Wave, Phil, let's continue the conversation on Twitter. We have another question from Thiago. It would be interesting to hear your thoughts regarding precious metals and if they would have a part in our portfolio. What do you think?
My initial answer would be yes, they should. Although I don't have any, so I'm kind of hypocritical there. But I do believe in having a diversified portfolio. But the one thing I should say really is, it depends on your goals, really, doesn't it? You need to define what your investment strategy is and why you're investing in precious metals. I always see them as a store of value, is the way I see them. And at the moment, I am more into, now I could be wrong because I haven't looked at charts or how they've grown over years, so I could be completely wrong, but that's just how I perceive them. And at the moment, I'm more interested in kind of trying to grow my money and grow my wealth. So I don't see them in my portfolio at the moment, but I do envisage, as I get older and I want to preserve my capital rather than trying to grow it, I will probably add a little bit more metals to my portfolio.
So I don't have any precious metals either, and I've thought about it several times in the past. I just never made up my mind on it. So probably I just don't, it doesn't fit my investor style. In general, Thiago, I would advise, and I will put the link in there to read a nice post from Börswolf. And I think you wrote something on gold there. I think it would be a good article to read to get inspired. I personally don't find myself in the right position. I don't have anything. I don't understand it. I don't understand how to value it. When you say as a store of value, for me, that's more already covered by diversification, having assets in dollars and euros and my local currency in Swiss francs. So if shit really hits the fan, that it will be a World War III or something like that, you will probably need physical gold anyway. And I guess most people are investing in an ETF. So, but if we would really get in such a situation, I will probably have other worries on my mind than thinking what to do with my gold ETF.
That's true. But no, very good question. And again, I'd probably urge you just to think about what your goals are and why you're investing. But they do have, of course, they have a place in portfolios. It just depends on what you're really looking for.
Okay, and then the last question comes from Mr. or Mrs. S. That sounds so awkward when you say S. But if you were starting dividend investing, what would be the core 10 stocks to start? Thanks for all the info. You guys are great. Oh, I just needed to say the last one. Maybe I can start here. My top 10, and they are exactly the same as on my blog in the tier 1 category. I will put the link there as well, but it would be Johnson & Johnson, 3M, PepsiCo, Munich Reinsurance from Germany. I would go also for the Swiss pharmaceutical Roche. I find them a little bit overvalued at the moment, but that would be also an interesting one for me. Unilever, Microsoft, Danone, and then the next two overvalued ones. I find Apple heavily overvalued from just the numbers, and Starbucks as well. But still, if I would need to create a basket, I would probably put this all in a basket and kind of make it my own little ETF and add every month to that, because then the average yield would do well and I would have enough diversification.
Cool. So nice comments there. So this is a good question for me, actually, because I've recently, and I know I've mentioned this in previous episodes, that I felt like my portfolio had too many stocks, at 42 stocks, and I'm working on trying to cut that down. So I've spent a large part of last month and this month, really trying to whittle down my portfolio and pick, sort of robbing your model a little bit, sorry to say, but pick the tiers and really try and beef out my portfolio. So I actually had companies picked. I had 8 companies. I didn't go as far as 10. So I want 32 companies in my portfolio. So I had 4 levels, 4 by 8 is 32. So the companies that I had were Johnson & Johnson, Microsoft, Danone, ABV, Apple, Unilever, Cisco, and Visa. And then today, just to make up the 10, I added Pepsi and I put in OWA as a real estate in there. So they were the ones that I've currently have in my top. So I still have some work to do to flesh that out, because I'm not too sure on Visa and Cisco exactly, should they be in that tier 1. But that's what I have at the moment.
Well, I think it's a pretty nice list, and those all seem to be companies that have like a catalyst, a strong moat, and lots of potential years of growth ahead of them. So
yeah, so I plan on writing a post about this once I have my kind of ideal portfolio selected. I'll probably write a post on how I came to it and my thoughts and why I picked these companies. So that's down the line. But those are my companies. Some of them are same companies as you. I suppose Unilever and Danone, but Johnson & Johnson just have to be there, don't they?
They have to be there.
They have to be there.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you, S. And this ends for us the section of the listeners' questions. So thank you for your engagement this week. It was a lot of fun to answer these questions. And you really made me think. So, and I know you as well, EMF. So that's always great. So
yeah, it's the best thing, isn't it, on a Friday after work, just make me think. But no, actually, I did actually really enjoy all these questions. They were nice.
Yeah. Okay, so then let's go to our. Okay, today we should say the second best topic of the week, second favorite, which are the stock picks of the week.
So I'll go first, and I'm going to pick mine just for dividend wave, and I'm going to pick Danone. I'm only joking. Today's pick for me is ABV in the healthcare sector. Look, I think they're a great company. They're a spin-off from Abbott. Really, they've got relatively low free cash flow, dividend yields high, 5.26, decent earnings. So that's what I'm going with this week. How about you?
It's a company, I have a full position in it, and if I would not have any shares in it, I will probably nibble in as well a little bit on ABV.
Yeah, I suppose the only concern that I would have with them is that their revenue, they have a high reliance on that drug.
Ulimbra.
Yeah, they have a high reliance on that. That's the only really concern. But I think they're really undervalued at the moment. I have them undervalued by about 22%, and that's enough for me to start buying. So I did add some shares on that this week. So that's why I picked them.
Okay. So I went for a total different stock today or for this week, but it's also pharmaceutical. So we had Walgreens today in the healthcare space that we discussed. We discussed Astrazeneca and the news. You just mentioned AbbVie, and my stock is Novo Nordisk. So why I'm mentioning this, I don't think that this is a heavy value, undervalued stock. I think it is actually fairly valued. So there's no margin of safety on here, but I would like to give it to people for inspiration and for some further research. At the moment, the dividend yield is 2.10% approximately. They just increased their interim dividend compared to last year with almost 9%. So it has been growing. Their sales has been growing. So they are big in diabetes care, right, and obesity. So let's say for the more modern societies where people don't have the best, let's say, eating habits and sporting habits, the more thicker people in the world, they earn a lot of money on that. And how sad it sounds. But they increased diabetes sales with 7%, in the first half, and Obesitas with 9%. So they're really doing well there. And the interesting thing is their growth came from international. They grew 12% of their sales internationally and only 1% in the US, which shows that they have a really well diversified portfolio and they don't depend, as some other companies, heavily only on the US. So the dividend has been growing again in a high single digit. Their payout ratio is just below 50%. Their price to earnings ratio is almost 24, so it is on the high end. And I know some investors use this threshold of 20. I don't use this threshold of 20 anymore so strongly because we're in a low interest environment. So it's for me now anything above 25, let's say, is for me the new 20. So there are of course, some weaknesses here or things to be considered, but these are relatively normal for pharmaceuticals. So regulatory risk, I think, drug price pressure, but also the currency impact of the dollar. We need to take that into account. We've seen that lately, right? I think most of us had like a 10%, almost a 10% portfolio impact on our US stocks.
Yeah.
And potential pipeline impact if clinical trials don't go as they go. You need to be aware that the stock price didn't really perform well in the last 2 years, but I think it was rather overvalued first, and now it just has been stabilizing and flat so that the value could catch up with the price that it had already. So I think it's an interesting candidate. I need to study it myself also a little bit still further, but I find it a really interesting one at the moment, and it's catching my attention all the time. So I'm really like I'm getting my trigger finger starts becoming itchy on this one.
Yeah, it sounds really interesting. I haven't done a whole lot of research on it, but diabetes for me is a big one. I know a couple of people, have a couple of close friends that suffer with it, so I know firsthand how important something like that is. So a company like that can support that, I mean, I'm all for that. So hopefully they'll do well, and I'm sure you'll do a write up on them soon and let us know if they're worth buying or not.
Yeah, I have not thought about doing I'm considering it, but I've got also some other nice stocks that I want to write about, so I have not made up my mind yet.
We just need more time, don't we? Or
exactly.
Duplicate yourself. That's it.
Exactly. Hey, this brings us to the end of the show again, EMF. It was, as usual, really a great pleasure again to have this conversation. And
it's become, I don't know, a Friday night tradition now. I mean, I enjoyed all the questions today. The questions were great, and look, we chose an easy topic, but that's probably because we've been working so hard during the week. But the questions this week were really on point. I did enjoy them, so I hope we get more of those over the coming shows.
Yeah. So if this is our Friday night, I don't want to ask my wife or your wife what they have been doing the last 13 weeks.
I think my wife is happy for a break. She gets the TV to herself on a Friday night, so she's happy.
Okay. Well, let's see. I will ask her soon. So, hey, EMF, have a great weekend. And to all the listeners, thanks for staying with us and thanks for listening this far. And see you next time again.
See you next week.